President Trump began the week looking to reassure millions of Americans in a primetime address that the war in Iran was under control and ramping down. Today, he ends the week with surging energy costs and an escalating conflict in the region. U.S. officials have confirmed that a search and rescue effort is underway to locate one of two crew members who were aboard an F-15 fighter jet that was downed in Iran. The other crew member has been rescued. MS Now has confirmed that the jet was shot down by Iranian forces, which marks yet another stunning escalation in this war. A channel affiliated with Iranian state television claimed that a U.S. fighter pilot ejected from the aircraft over southwest Iran. The anchor for an affiliate of state TV urged Iranians to take matters into their own hands and deliver any, quote, enemy pilot to police for a, quote, precious prize. Iran's Speaker of Parliament, America's preferred contact point for negotiations on a ceasefire, by the way, openly ridiculed the United States over the downed jet and its, quote, no strategy war. Back in Washington, a shakeup at the Pentagon preceded the news. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth ousted the Army's most senior general. Two U.S. officials tell Axios the dismissal was, quote, motivated by clashing personalities and not disagreements over where the Army is headed. And moments ago, the New York Times, citing two U.S. officials, reported that another Air Force combat plane crashed near the Strait of Hormuz. The lone pilot was safely rescued. MS Now has not confirmed this news yet. Joining us, former Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, and MS Now political analyst Rick Stengel, staff writer for The Atlantic, and MS Now political analyst Ashley Parker, retired four-star general and MS Now military analyst General Barry McCaffrey, and former U.S. Army officer, captain in the JAG Corps, and former assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Connecticut, Margaret Donovan. It's great to have all of you. General McCaffrey, I'm going to start with you. What is your take? What are you watching for with this story of the downing of a F-15 fighter jet? What does it signify to you about where this war is headed?
Well, obviously, it underscores the fact there's no such thing as a safe combat operation in an F-15E Eagle. You know, it's a magnificent aircraft, twin engine, 1,500 miles an hour, two pilots, used in ground and air-to-air action. But they got one, and the question may be, it was a man-pad, hand-carried anti-aircraft missile, or possibly just a 50 caliber machine gun. You know, the saying used to be in Vietnam, big sky, little bullet. But by the way, to underscore the political change in the nature of air warfare, in Vietnam, we lost 3,700 fixed-wing aircraft and over 4,000 helicopters, half of them accidents, half of them in combat action. So the change reality, we've flown over 10,000 sorties in Iran, devastating air-sea campaign, and lost one aircraft so far due to enemy action.
We have absolutely devastated the Iranian forces, General, but it also appears that it is not true, as the president has stated, that we managed to wipe out their air defenses and leave them with few options. He described the Americans as basically having all the cards at their disposal. Richard, when you look back at what we heard from the president on Wednesday and then you see this news today, do you think that the president, that he was blustering, giving his personal perspective on where things stood? Or do you think that it was a signal that the military does not properly or fully understand Iranian capabilities at this stage in the war?
Antonia, it's a good question. And I think we can all stipulate that Donald Trump doesn't always tell the truth. I think I don't know if an intern wrote that speech and pieced it together from his Truth Social posts, but there's so much in that speech that was actually false. And his penchant for exaggeration, I mean, General McCaffrey could agree, it's not the greatest military victory in the history of military victories. But the problem now is he basically said that Iran was defenseless, that it had no anti-aircraft weapons, no ballistic missiles. And apparently they shot a jet down today. I pray that our aviator is rescued. But what this does is gives them a very clear propaganda victory. And what I'm sure people in the White House are worrying about, or people who remember it, is the parading of American hostages in the Iranian hostage crisis in 1979. I can remember, those early images of seeing blindfolded American diplomats. I mean, this is what the great fear must be now, which is among the many, many reasons that they must be exercising as much energy to rescue that second pilot.
Margaret, how do you read this moment? And I also want to get your sense of the broader escalatory actions, your analysis of them, as over 100 international law experts have been warning that U.S. strikes on Iran's infrastructure may well be war crimes. The president bragged last night about the strikes on a bridge, and at least according to Iranian officials, at least maybe 8 people may be dead as a result of just that alone. How do you read this moment?
So 2 things. One is that an pilot that has been captured after a downed aircraft, that is sort of your classic scenario of a prisoner of war situation. And this is precisely why it is important that the United States adheres to and publicly states that it will adhere to the rules of engagement. Just a few weeks ago, you had Secretary Hegseth saying that we were going to take no quarters of the enemy. The enemy was going to be given no quarters and there would be no forgiveness. We're not following the stupid rules of engagement. Well, part of the reason why the United States follows the rules of engagement is because it's intrinsically the right and lawful thing to do, but also it creates an incentive for the enemy to treat prisoners of war with the same respect that is required under Geneva. And so I think we're all praying that if this pilot is found by the Iranians, he or she is treated with dignity and respect. But it certainly does not help the situation when you have a Secretary of Defense announcing on national TV that he doesn't care about the rules of engagement, he doesn't care about Geneva, he doesn't care about the law of armed conflict. So I think that's my first problem. To your second point, the threats on civilian infrastructure, it is not uncommon in combat to target civilian infrastructure. In general, it will be considered protected, to have protected status, but in certain instances, it can lose that status if it is being used for a military objective. And my big issue with the targets against civilian infrastructure and the threats of targeting civilian infrastructure is that it is unclear whether or not it is actually linked to a military advantage or whether it's being used as a negotiating tactic using civilians basically as leverage, which would, of course, be unlawful and improper. So I think there's a host of issues, but the United States needs to get back to being the standard bearer for the rules of engagement and the law of armed conflict. And this downed aircraft is a perfect example of how and when we can do that.
Ashley, to your knowledge, everything that Margaret just described there, is it leading the White House, the Pentagon, to make some different decisions to change the calculus around this war?
Well, we haven't really heard much from the White House today about this latest development, other than Caroline Leavitt has said the president is being briefed. But I will say that it, of course, politically is a problem for this president in the sense that, in general, he prefers these sort of short kinetic bursts of force. That's why he liked what happened in Venezuela. It was quick. It was militarily flawless. He can sort of view it like the scene, the climax of a good military action thriller. And you saw him in that speech he gave earlier this week, trying to do what he is often, frankly, so able to do in the rest of his life, will a reality into existence. But you cannot do that in a war. He has not been able to do that with Iran. And the shooting down of this aircraft and the pilot who is still missing just underscores that what President Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth are saying about how the war is going, how degraded Iran's capabilities are, is simply not as accurate as they would like the public to believe.
General, do you think that the shooting down of this jet is going to increase the likelihood it could possibly inspire the president to move forward, to put boots on the ground, as we know from the reporting has been on the table? Do you think that this makes that scenario more likely, General?
No, probably not. But I think Trump right now, look, the big problem is he's trapped. It's been a devastating and effective air-sea campaign. Much of it's running out of energy right now and targets, but he's stuck. He wants to leave, leaving the Strait of Hormuz blocked, our allies at risk for oil security. He's not going to get the nuclear program inspectors on the ground, which he needs. He didn't get regime change. So far, he's in a strategic loss situation. And he doesn't know how to break out of it. I think at some point, the Iranians aren't bluffing, and I think Trump is. Because if he puts combat operations into Iran, tries to seize the port of, the ports along the entrance of the Gulf, tries to go in and get HEU fissile material on the ground with a raid, probably 5,000 troops and days on the ground with engineers. If he goes after Karg Island, 400 miles up the Persian Gulf, he's likely to suffer a disaster. So I wouldn't be surprised if the firing of this marvelous, superb officer, General Randy George, was related to advice he's getting. Watch out, you're on the verge of a military disaster.
Speaking of that firing, Margaret, it doesn't seem like a great moment for Secretary Hegseth to be purging military leaders. We also have learned from NBC News reporting that his efforts to block otherwise highly qualified individuals, potentially the allegation being that his main issue with them is their identity, Black service members, women in leadership in the military from key promotions and roles. What does that kind of action in the middle of a war do to our readiness and morale?
Yeah, I mean, I have heard so many times that Pete Hegseth is allowed to be in charge of culture wars, but not real wars, because he doesn't actually have any military leadership or capability. I think somebody like General George has probably forgotten more military strategy than Pete Hegseth ever remembered. And so this is a good example of where whatever type of culture war Pete Hegseth is waging is having a real effect on the military's readiness and capability. And I think it's probably more than coincidence that you're seeing the same types of firings across the board. So I think that has a serious effect on morale, which is sort of an intangible, immeasurable facet of these. But it's a perfect example of just his incompetence getting in the way of people who could actually be helping him run the military in a very serious moment.